Hello, I'm Fumiaki Kubo, a professor of political science at the University of Tokyo. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you. I'm very happy and excited to see the G7 summit meeting held in Japan this year. There are many issues that I like to address, but today I will focus on the issue of territorial disputes in the South China Sea. I do this because G7 summit meeting, especially held in Japan, is really a good opportunity for the participants of the meeting to have a common understanding of what is happening in the South China Sea. For countries such as Vietnam and the Philippines, the importance of this issue is self-evident. It is also the case with Japan, which has a territorial dispute with China in the East China Sea. However, for the participants from Europe, the South China Sea is a very distant place. For them, China is very often a good trading partner. So it is crucially important for the leaders of the countries from Europe and EU to have an accurate understanding of the situation in the South China Sea. At the meeting of the foreign ministers of G7 countries in Hiroshima last month, all the participants jointly issued a following statement on maritime security, which said, I quote, "We are concerned about the situation in the East and South China Seas, and we emphasize the fundamental importance of peaceful management and settlement of disputes. We express a strong opposition to any intimidating, coercive, or provocative unilateral actions that could alter the status quo and increase tensions, and urge all states to refrain from such actions as land reclamations, including large-scale ones, building of outposts, as well as their use for military purposes, and to act in accordance with international law, including the principles of freedoms of navigation and overflight." Unquote. I believe that this is a very good and important document, and I think this is a very good start. G7 top leaders should make a similar and hopefully even a stronger statement on this matter in order to stop the reclamation, construction, and the militarization by China in the South China Sea. As to the foreign policy under the Obama administration, the Japanese experts of security tend to discuss how much so-called the rebalance to Asia has been accomplished. But we should note that what is at issue is not just how much the United States allocates its resources to Asia. Our thinking has to go beyond that to think about how all of us should support the current international order. I say this because what we are seeing now in the world is a serious threat to the current international order built after the end of the Second World War. China is trying to change the status quo by the unilateral use of force and coercion in the East China Sea as well as in the South China Sea. Russia is also changing the status quo in Crimea and eastern Ukraine by unilateral action. And there is a threat coming from ISIS or Islamic State. 2 out of 5 permanent member countries of the UN Security Council are changing the status quo by force. G7 countries have to think about how to defend, how to buttress the current international order. On our part, not just hoping that Europeans pay more attention to the situation in Asia, Japan itself should be attentive and committed to these problems in Crimea, Ukraine, the Middle East, as well as a problem of terrorism in Europe. This is one of the most important functions of the G7 summit meeting. It is crucially very, very important for the Europeans, Americans, Canadians, and the Japanese to share perspectives on the security at the global level together. As to our relations with Russia, I'm aware that the Obama White House is very nervous about the summit meeting between Mr. Putin and Mr. Abe. This is very touchy and difficult issue. In the unlikely case of Mr. Putin making big concessions on the northern territory, Japan would accept them, of course, but even in this case, Japan can still do something very positive in terms of international cooperation, such as making a large-scale financial aid to Ukraine. I'm hopeful that the United States and other members of G7 summit meeting trust Prime Minister Abe, who is willing to strengthen the solidarity of like-minded countries, especially among the United States, European countries, Canada, and Japan. I stop here, wishing success of the G7 summit meeting in Japan. Thank you very much for listening.